Welcome to WiseTake.com. This is CK013. You can find me on Twitter at CK_013. And yes, we are bringing you another NBA DFS podcast. It is Tuesday, March 28th, 2017, and baseball season is almost here. I know I'm pumped. I hope you guys are. When baseball season comes, we're going to go ahead and transition straight over to baseball. At this point in the NBA season, it gets kind of tough during the regular season, so we may do a couple basketball pods here and there, but this will be the last full week of NBA before we switch over to baseball. And like I said, we haven't worked out the schedule yet. We might work in some podcasts. We might do like a 2-3 split, seeing as how we do 5 podcasts a week. But the baseball is definitely going to be a big priority as it's starting off. There's a lot of opportunities for you guys playing DFS, and hopefully we get some new people on board. So I hope you guys are ready for baseball, because I know I am. And I know somebody who you'll meet later in the week who we're bringing on to the WiseTake team. I know he is. So it's going to be a phenomenal baseball season for us. Anyway, we saw Westbrook go off on the previous slate. It was a pretty ugly slate. Today we have 8 games, and they seem pretty awesome on paper. From the naked eye, it looks like we got some great decisions to make. It should be a lot of fun. Things are always risky this time of year. Some teams have more to play for than others. Some teams starting to wind it down for the playoffs and whatnot. So it does get a little tough in basketball this time of year. So on paper, I will say the matchup looks great. It seems like a phenomenal tournament slate for sure. 8 games, a big selection, and some really great high-scoring games. So and we even got some awesome studs. We even have some value that may be opened up. So there's a lot to get through, and I'm sure you guys want to move on past the ugly Monday slate. So let's move on to this awesome 6-game slate, and let's dive right into the injuries. Al Jefferson is out with an ankle. Rodney Stuckey is questionable with a knee. Glenn Robinson is out with a calf. John Henson is out with a thumb. Beasley is out with a knee. Johnny O'Brien is questionable. Ramon Sessions is questionable. Leandro Barbosa is questionable with a hamstring. Ronnie Price is questionable with his leg. Paul Millsap, Bazemore, and Thabo are all out. Deion Waiters expected to be out. McRoberts is out. Okafor is questionable with a knee. Sean Kilpatrick's questionable with a hamstring. Joe Harris is expected to be out. Ryan Anderson is out. And Brandon Ingram is questionable. So it's a pretty long list as usual for a typical NBA slate. And I don't think there's a sport where injuries matter more than the NBA. I definitely think, obviously the injuries matter because you got to know who's playing, right? And no matter what sport you're playing, if that guy's not playing that day, you're in trouble. But basketball doesn't regulate their lineups, and I've said this before. So that's why a lot of times the lineups are released literally right before their game starts. So that really, it troubles some of the DFS players, which is why which is why late swap being taken away in DraftKings was such a huge deal this year. Because there's a big debate over whether it helps the pros or the Joes. We're not going to get into that right now. Maybe we'll save that for later, talk about that some other time. But we got a lot to get through, so let's dive right in, position by position, as we always do. We got James Harden. He's 12-3. He's shooting guard eligible on DraftKings, shooting guard only on DraftKings. On FanDuel, and point guard eligible on DraftKings. So he's 12-3. He's got a matchup with Golden State. No Durant, so this matchup's going to be a little bit different. This game's going to be a little bit different. It should be similar to what we've seen of last year. And Golden State, while they are one of the fastest-paced teams in the league, they're also one of the highest-rated defensive teams as far as efficiency. So it's going to be interesting. I wouldn't expect Harden to dud again, and I would expect this game to stay fairly close, even if it's just these two teams sending a message. So we saw Harden on a crazy streak, 73, 72, 80, and then he had 46.25 against Oklahoma City, which was the day of the FanDuel Live Final. So we kind of dudded on anybody who took him that day, even though his team won pretty handily. So what we've seen is that Houston, since he's come aboard, they haven't really been as dependent on him. Now they're still extremely dependent on him, don't get me wrong, but it seems like they haven't been as dependent. He took 15 shots against Oklahoma City. That was it. In his previous 3 games, he took 24, 29, and 23. So if he's playing Golden State, I would imagine as good defensively as Golden State is, even without Durant, I would imagine that Harden's going to have to play a bigger role in this game. Golden State has some decent rim protectors with Zaza, Draymond down there. So I think that Harden's going to have to shoulder more of this load. So I love Harden at 12-3. There's not much else to say. It's a fast-paced game. He's at home. He's got a lot to prove. He's chasing that MVP. He's chasing the playoffs, and he's trying to prove a point that he's just as good as Westbrook, Curry, and all those other guys. So definitely love Harden, especially in tournaments. Giannis is 9-7 against Charlotte. Giannis he's been killing it. He's been playing well. I think on Sunday he had a rough game. So he had 2 big games, right, over 60, 65 or higher. And then against Chicago, In 37 minutes, he just didn't have it. And even with him, he took 14 shots that game as opposed to 22, 22, and 21 in his previous 3. So his shot attempts were down. It kind of made sense. They were playing Chicago, a slower-paced team, and now he has a matchup with Charlotte. So it should be interesting at 9-7. I think people are a little afraid to play him because, yeah, he can get you that 70, but he can just as easily. I mean, let's put it this way. He hits his floor a lot more than like Westbrook and Harden do, right? So I think you can get some lower ownership on him. But yeah, he's still Giannis. You know what his upside is for sure. We got Steph Curry at 9-4. Certainly in play. He's going to see some Pat Bev defense, which could make things a little tough, but we know what Curry's upside could be. Curry's a guy that can get it done with. He doesn't need to just score. He's kind of like, similar to Harden and Westbrook. You typically, especially with Durant out, he typically gets a decent amount of peripherals. In his last 3 games, he's not average, but he's gotten 2, 6, and 4 steals. That's a good amount of steals, and when you do it that consistently, it starts to become a thing. It's not just a fluke. So we know what his upside could be against Sacramento. We saw him put up 68 DraftKings points. I would certainly take that. So it may be tough to fit Curry and Harden together. So you might have to pick one and decide. Hopefully you're picking the right one and just kind of pick somebody else from the game. Maybe take like Harden and Clay or Draymond or something. But we'll talk about those guys. Kemba Walker's at home against Milwaukee, 8K. A lot of people don't like to play Kemba against Milwaukee, but they do like to play Kemba at home. Well, I can tell you that while for the duration of the season, targeting point guards against Milwaukee has not been a favorable thing. Lately, over the last week or so, point guards have been crushing Milwaukee, and we saw Rondo kind of do it. Now, the thing is, it's typically not necessarily scoring point guards, but typically point guards that can dish out assists. And I would classify Kemba as more of a scorer. However, lately, his assists have been up. Over his last 4 games, 9, 5, 7, and 4 assists. That's pretty good. If he's going to keep that up against Milwaukee, I definitely love Kemba at home at 8K in a situation where I think his ownership could be a little light when you consider there's Harden, Giannis, Steph Curry, some of the guys we already gone over. And then there's some guys in this smaller, in the lower tier that we'll talk about. Dennis Schroeder at 7-8 against Phoenix. It's a phenomenal matchup, but I'm not sure it's justified with this price so high. So we've seen Atlanta not play well ever since Millsap went out, and this is a matchup where I would expect them to win against a young depleted Phoenix team that doesn't play any kind of defense. So I definitely like him. I'm just a little concerned with that price. I mean, it's a pretty drastic jump. He's been averaging at about 7,100. Now all of a sudden he's 7-8. That's pretty expensive for Dennis Schroeder, but. We know his usage is going to be elevated. Last time he played Phoenix, he got 50 DraftKings points, and I think that has a lot to do with it. And granted, Millsap was in that game, but this is a situation where his usage could be even higher. So, in cash games, I don't know if I'd go with 78, but in GPPs, you'd have to consider it just because I think that people are going to prefer to play maybe Kemba or some guys way up or way down. So he could be somebody that gets overlooked in tournaments, and he certainly has massive upside, especially in a favorable matchup. Of course, anytime Phoenix is playing, you have to be concerned about the blowout. Goran Dragic, 7,500. We found out that he's playing through some kind of injury. I wish I would have known that on Sunday before I put him in my cash games, and he cost me a good amount of money. But I didn't, and now we find out that apparently he's playing through some kind of injury. In 34 minutes against Boston in a great matchup, he only got 22.25 DraftKings points. Extremely tilting, extremely disappointing. But Dragic's the guy you can count on for steals. He's 7,500. I don't mind the price. He's playing Detroit, who's on the back end of a back-to-back, and he should see a combination of Ish Smith and Reggie Jackson. Neither of which I'm too concerned with. What I'm concerned about is Whiteside's in a pretty good spot here, so I'm not crazy about the Dragon. But at 7,500, his price is starting to go down. I definitely think he's worth looking into. Ricky Rubio, 7,400. Rubio has been tearing it up, and I'm hoping he can do the same. Last time he played Indiana, he only got 31 DraftKings points. This is a different Ricky Rubio. He only took 6 shot attempts in that game. Over his last 4 games, 11, 13, 10, and 11 shot attempts. So Tibbs has told him he wants him to take more shots, and that's exactly what Rubio has been doing. And he only played 25 minutes against Portland, 28 DraftKings points. He certainly dudded, but he still took 11 shots. So I definitely like Rubio, 7,400. I don't understand why his price is so low. We just saw this guy put up 50 just a game ago. He had one bad game. We saw him put up 60s, 40s. Like we've seen him show some immense upside. So I'm a little shocked at his price. And against Indiana, I certainly like it against Teague. I'm not afraid of Teague whatsoever. So I think he's certainly in play. On the other side, Jeff Teague, 7,100. The guy is still underpriced. Now I know he's coming off a bad game against Philly, but he seemed to have hit his stride before that with 3 straight 40-plus DraftKings points games. So at 7,100, I still think that price is pretty attractive. And that's the problem, is there's so many different ways to go with point guard. There's so many good point guards, including Tyler Ulis at 6,900. Yeah, I'm a little concerned he might be tired, but look, the minutes he's getting is just ridiculous. Now, against Boston, he only played 34. And the fact that we're even saying that only played 34, that's just crazy. Um, so 3 out of his last 4 games, he's played over 40 minutes. We know Barbosa is questionable. I think Barbosa might be out. I don't remember what I said there. But yeah, so he's questionable with a hamstring, and then Price is questionable. If both those guys are out, or really Price, because Price is the main backup, but they will put Barbosa at backup point guard. If both of those guys are out, I think you might have to put Ulis in your cash games, whether you like it or not, because the matchup is phenomenal. Schroeder is not a very good defender. Atlanta has been giving it up to guards all year. I've loved targeting guards against them. And even though I'm a little concerned that Ulis might be tired as his shooting has really, really taken a dive, we know what his upside could be when he's playing that many minutes. So if he gets you 40 DraftKings points, which is definitely possible through 40 minutes against a team that struggles against guards, I think you'd be pretty happy with that at 6,900, especially in your cash game. So I think he's pretty safe just because of the minutes he's going to play. Jeremy Lin, 5,900. I'm not crazy about Lin in this spot. His minutes are iffy. He's coming off a great game against Atlanta, and that goes to show 40 DraftKings points in 28 minutes against Atlanta last time Jeremy Lin played. That was on March 26th. So we know targeting point guards against Atlanta is a real thing, and it has been all year. And I definitely that's the reason I like Ulis. As far as Lin against Philly, I'm not crazy about the matchup. Philly actually has some decent defense with McConnell, and it's just not a situation where I think there's too many other good plays. I just don't see myself going there. You can consider Tyler Johnson. He's been playing well, especially since Dragic has not been playing so well. But GPP's only because we have seen him play not so well without waiters as well. So I think McConnell is very interesting. He's been playing, the problem is his minutes have been down. Over his last 3 games, he hasn't broken 30 minutes. He hasn't even hit 30 minutes, so that's a little concerning. But the matchup is fine against Lin and whoever else. I'm not worried about their defense, so I definitely think he's in play if you're looking to punt at the guard option. Lou Williams coming off a big game. The only way I like to play Lou is if I'm not playing Harden, and I like Harden way too much in the situation not to play him, so I don't think I'm going to be big on Lou. Tournament guy, you know what his upside is. I typically like to play him when I'm concerned about a blowout. And Sunday, I love Lou Williams. I thought he was a great play just because I was bigger on Westbrook than I was on Harden. So even though I didn't expect a blowout, I just figured that, which it kind of was, most of the game it was a blowout, and that's why Lou Williams did his thing. But in most scenarios, I typically will play Lou if I'm fading Harden, and I don't think I'm fading Harden on this slate. So Malcolm Brogdon against Charlotte, you can go there. Not a guy that shows us real upside, though he does show us consistency. So if you want to punt there in cash or something, I guess I sort of get it. Ish Smith played a lot of minutes against New York with Reggie Jackson resting. Reggie Jackson will now be playing, so I wouldn't be surprised to see those minutes take a little bit of a dip there. Barbosa, if he does play, would be an interesting punt option, just worth mentioning real quick. But anyway, we're going to move on here to shooting guard. Talked about Harden. Klay Thompson, I think, is a great spot. Reese is going to be playing the 4. He's one of their best defenders. So when you put him at the 4, there's really nobody on this Houston team to cover Klay, as Beverly's the other good defender, and he's going to probably be on Curry. I think that should leave a lot of opportunities for a guy like Klay Thompson. I definitely think he's interesting. He's 7,500, so you're definitely paying for it. And it's going to be hard to fit Harden with any one of these, upper echelon guys unless there's a bunch of value that opens up. But in cash and GPPs, Klay's typically pretty consistent. He did have one dud recently against Sacramento, which was strange. He shot 3 for 14. But again, then he bounced back against Memphis, put up 38 DraftKings points. So this is a pace-up spot for even him. Houston is a very fast-paced team. Should be a lot of scoring. He's playing a horrible defense when their best defenders shouldn't be covering him. So I definitely like Klay a lot. Booker, 7,400. Atlanta struggled against shooting guards all year. We know Thabo's out. So I think in cash games and GPPs, Booker makes sense. The only thing that scares me about Booker, now lately we've seen him get more assists. We've seen him get more rebounds. But he doesn't always. He's even gotten, a decent amount of steals lately, but he doesn't do that always. So that's a little concerning to me because if he's having a bad shooting night, which we've seen from him before, we've seen him have really bad shooting nights, he could really disappoint you. But he is getting an influx of minutes with all the injuries lately. So you have to like Booker, especially if Barbosa and Price are out. Booker's going to have to play a ridiculous load of minutes. So, injury dependent for both of these guys. But remember, they're getting minutes. And while you might think they have nothing to play for, the young guys are trying to establish themselves and get experience. That's why they're playing so much. So the Phoenix guys, Ulis, Booker, these two guys are pretty much blowout proof, and that's what I love about them, and that's why I think they both make for great cash game plays. Nick Batum against Milwaukee at 7K. The price is right, and Batum is coming off an awesome game against Phoenix. Certainly in play. I think I'd rather play Booker in cash, but in GPPs, I think Batum's an interesting pivot. Tim Hardaway Jr. is in a great spot. He's been getting mega minutes. Bazemore and Thabo are out. Those are the two guys that typically back him up. They're not here. So we're seeing Hardaway play Ulis and Booker type minutes, 39 and 40 in his last two without these guys. We know they're going to be out. So I think Hardaway is certainly a solid cash game option against a bad Phoenix defense. So I definitely love Hardaway at 6,500. Eric Gordon, 5,300. We saw him start for Anderson last time. If he starts, he always makes for an interesting cash game play because he typically plays a good amount of minutes. He played 36 against Oklahoma City, 32 against New Orleans, 32 against Denver. So he's been getting the minutes. The usage is a little bit of a concern, and he's priced up. And when he was 48, 49, I would love to throw him in cash. But at 53, he really makes you think on a slate like this where you're probably going to go stars and scrubs. At least I would think. And even if you weren't going to go stars and scrubs, even the mid-tier, it's all like upper mid-tier guys that are in play. So there's so many other good options. It's going to be hard for me to pull the trigger on a guy like Eric Gordon. Same thing for Josh Richardson. KCP is in a similar situation. I'm just not dying to go there on the back end of a back-to-back. Iguodala's coming off a pretty good game, but he hasn't really shown me the ability to put together multiple good games. So like the last time that I saw him score 40 DraftKings points or over that, he followed up the next game with a 20. So at 5K, I don't necessarily want to buy high on him. I don't like to pay anything more than like 4.8 for a guy like Iguodala, so I'm probably off. But it's a pace-up spot, and if you need to get exposure to that game at a cheap price, he's certainly an option. Pat Bev, 4,900. He completely crapped the bed against Oklahoma City. His team won. He shot 0 for 6 from the field, 0 for 4 from 3, and didn't score any actual points. He got 9.5 DraftKings points. And I know a lot of people played him at the FanDuel Live Final, and they were extremely tilted on it. So I get it. You better believe he's going to be low-owned because anybody that played him against Oklahoma City is going to be upset. They probably figured play Beverly against Westbrook. They're going to need him. And I thought the same thing. It just wasn't what it happened. So he's an option that I think you can put in tournaments just because if you're looking for a contrarian play, he's a punt option at 4,900, and I don't think too many people are going to be on him. Monta Ellis moved into the starting lineup, and he played pretty well, 24 DraftKings points. He only cost 4K. Now he's 46. So, yeah, if you get the 24, you're not going to be upset. But it kind of lowers it on a situation where you're really looking for value to pay up for some big guys. Shabazz Muhammad is very interesting. His minutes have been kind of down lately. They were up for a little while, but 12 minutes against the Lakers, 20 against Portland. Granted, both those games were blowouts, but I'm not crazy about him at 4-3. I preferred him to be in the threes if his minutes are going to be inconsistent. Nick Stauskas, 4,100. I was playing him a lot for a while, but now over his last two games, he's no longer his minutes haven't passed the 30s like they were in the past. That could be because Philly has been getting blown out a little bit, but either way, at 11 and 13, I definitely think he's an option just because Brooklyn's defense is that bad. So if he's going to get at least 25 minutes, which I don't see why he wouldn't, I would consider him, but I would no longer consider him in cash. I'd probably consider him in tournaments. Then again, 4,100, if I'm desperate for a cash game play to be able to get me to afford a guy like Harden or whatever the case may be, I might have to do that. Randy Foye, 3,300. His minutes have been up and down, and his performance has been up and down. So, I'm hoping that some injury news breaks out later in the slate, and then we can find some of these really cheap pivot kind of guys to help us afford these studs. Moving on to small forward, we talked about Giannis. Paul George is going to have a tough matchup. He's 8,400. He continues to play pretty well. Now, against Philly, he only got 34.5 DraftKings points. He cost 8,700. So I'm sure a lot of people weren't too happy with that. But he had a tough matchup with Covington, and all the small forwards kind of struggled a little bit that slate. So he didn't actually really kill you if you had him. You were probably just upset that you paid that much for him. But he didn't really kill anybody. At 8,400, his price is still high for Paul George, but we know what his upside is. And other than that game against Philly, he had been playing well. It's another tough matchup for him. He's drawn a matchup with Andrew Wiggins, another young, solid wing defender. However, the last time these teams met, Paul George shot 12 for 22 from the field. That's 54.5. That's a 54.5%. And he got 46.5 DraftKings points. So I definitely think Paul George is in play, and I don't think too many people are going to go there, because they're going to see that red 2 under opponent rank, and they're going to realize that Andrew Wiggins, who is a solid defender, is going to be covering him. Paul George is a guy that I think in tougher matchups a lot of times excels, and I know he might have been disappointing against Covington, but we've seen Paul George in tough matchups put up big points against LeBron and some of these other guys. So I definitely think that if people can afford to go up to 84 for Paul, he's kind of in no man's land, right? Like Giannis is above him at 9.7, and then TJ Warren is below him at 7.2. So I think a lot of people will kind of skip right over Paul George and need to go above or under. So in tournaments, I think he makes a lot of sense, even though his price is a little high. TJ Warren. Also, Paul George is small and power forward eligible on DraftKings. TJ Warren is also small forward and power forward eligible on DraftKings. He's 7,200. He should see some Prince defense. Prince is a rookie. He should be able to do what he wants. And he's been playing pretty big minutes. Only one game in his last 4 that was under. It was 31 minutes. That was the lowest he's played. Other than that, 39, 45, 37. His minutes have been up there. His production has been pretty good. He's playing in Atlanta. It's another one of those situations where in the Suns, you kind of just throw the Suns in cash just because they don't have anybody. So they're young guys, or even guys like Warren, they're going to play because there's nobody else for them to play. Nick Batum at 7K, we talked about him. Robert Covington is small forward and power forward eligible. He's 6,800. That's a great price. He didn't have such a great game against Indiana. He was 6,500. He was in a tougher matchup against Paul George. I played him a lot, and he didn't kill me at 28 DraftKings points, but obviously he didn't exactly hit what I was looking for. So we know what his upside is. Brooklyn has no defense. So if the problem with Covington is he kind of has to hit his shot. He takes a lot of threes and things like that. And if he's not hitting his shots, it's going to be hard for him to hit value. But at 6,800 in this phenomenal matchup, in a game that Vegas seems to think is going to be close, which Brooklyn has been playing a lot better lately, we have to admit, I definitely think Covington is interesting at 6,800 for sure. Andrew Wiggins at 6,800, definitely interesting. He seems to have started to come around. We saw him explode against the Lakers. He played 44 minutes and got 50.75 DraftKings points. So that's phenomenal for him. Then again, he did come back the next day against Portland and kind of dud out again at 24.5 DraftKings points. That was the back end of a back-to-back. So he's had a day of rest, and I would imagine he wakes up a little bit. Actually, he's had 2 days off because he didn't play the 26th or the 27th. So after 2 days off, it's going to be very interesting. If you have any tools you use, check it out. Because he's going to play a lot of minutes like he always does. He's under 7K, which I love playing that for Wiggins because his usage is actually high. Look at his shot attempts, 19, 28, 15, and 20. He takes a lot of shots. It's just a matter of is he going to make those shots. And he's a guy that can get you some peripherals. He can get you some blocks, assists. He can get you some steals. So I definitely like Wiggins at 68. I think the problem on this slate is there's so many guys in so many good spots. Chris Middleton at 6,200. Now, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist is a decent defender. But we've seen Charlotte continue to get smashed by small forwards. So even Middleton you have to consider, especially if you're not going to play Giannis. Tobias Harris, I don't think I want to go there. Ariza, I think it's a good time for me to fade Ariza. Now, listen, him playing well at the 4 is a thing. But I think too many people are going to chase him. If he plays the 4 here, he's going to draw a Draymond defense. That's not something that I like to target against. On top of that, people are going to look at this 50-point game, and I was all over him. Me and Fuego talked a lot about Ariza the day of his live final, and he knows that I like Ariza when he plays the 4. That 50 came out of nowhere. I'll admit that. I didn't see that coming. And the reason he did it, he shot 9 for 11 from the field, 6 from 8 from 3. That is 81. That's almost 82% field goal from the field, and 75% from 3. That is not something Ariza does very often. As a matter of fact, look at his previous game logs. We see 30%, 45%, 25%. I think this is a great time to hop off of Ariza and fade him. If I'm wrong, you can bash me on Twitter. That's fine. If you disagree, go ahead and play him. I personally am not. I don't want any part of Ariza. Now, if it's maybe he's hot, maybe he keeps it going. If you believe in hot streaks like that, then certainly throw him in there. But I personally, I'm off of him. Josh Richardson, we talked about. Marcus Morris, I'm off him. Prince is down to 4,800. I love that price considering you know he's going to get a lot of minutes. He's going to be chalk. If he's not chalk, I will be super surprised. My issue here, I think in cash games, he makes a lot of sense because he's cheap. Unless we hear about other value that opens up. But keep in mind, we've seen him play 30 minutes and 28 minutes in a couple games and put up 19 DraftKings points each. So he's coming off a great game against Brooklyn. He was 4,100. He got 34.5 DraftKings points. But that was against Brooklyn. Now he's against Phoenix, which seems to be a similar matchup. A horrible defensive team. And, I'm not worried about TJ Warren defense or Booker or anybody else they may put on him. So I do like Prince. Just keep in mind he is chalky. So in tournaments, if you think this guy has a pretty good chance of kind of dudding, I understand the fade, but it's gonna be really hard to fade him at 4,800. I was thinking he might be up to 5K. If he was 5K, I'd have no problem fading him. If he was 45 or less, I would have to play him. He's priced right in between at 48 to make you think about it. But I still think with Thabo, Millsap, and Bazemore out, this guy's going to have to play minutes. He played 38 minutes against Brooklyn. They're going to need him to play. And so, but I think because of that, you have to at least consider him, especially in cash games. Now, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist is only $100 cheaper. This is a more proven player, but his minutes are not nearly as secure. He's coming off a game against Phoenix where he did play 35 minutes. That's fine and dandy, but we don't know if that's going to be the case going forward because that's not something he typically does. So he's interesting, but not too crazy about it. Matt Barnes, you can certainly take a shot with. His minutes are typically in the 20s, but they're inconsistent, and his production is inconsistent because his usage is kind of low on Golden State. KJ McDaniels is interesting only if Kilpatrick remains out. Against Phoenix on the 23rd, KJ McDaniels put up 33.5 DraftKings points at just $3K. His price is up to $3,900 because he's been seeing minutes. And the only way he's going to continue to see minutes, I think, is if Kilpatrick remains out. If Kilpatrick comes back, we could see him take a back seat. But we don't know for sure. But at $3,900, it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Karis LeVert is $3,800. I think the big problem with Karis LeVert is what's his upside, and he's obviously not a safe player. He doesn't typically break 30 too much, and even with injuries, he never really surpasses 26 minutes. So I'm not really big on him, even though I will admit he's super cheap. But yeah, I mean, let's move on to power forward. You got Karl-Anthony Towns at 10-1. It's a great price for him against Indiana. I'm not afraid of Indiana bigs. If he plays power forward, he should mash up Thaddeus Young. If he plays center against Miles Turner, he still should mash up Miles Turner. So I love Cat at 10-1. And again, it's the problem is everybody seems to be in such a great spot. Draymond against Houston also seems to be a great spot. You know they're going to need him. He's one of their best defenders. He plays good minutes. He's coming off a rough game against Memphis, so he's going to want to bounce back. And we know Draymond has ridiculous upside, and he's a guy that does not have to score to hit that upside. So I love Draymond at 8,100. I love Sarge. I always love Sarge. He's a matchup against Brooklyn. I think it's a great spot to play him. He kind of dudded against everybody, and I had a feeling about that against Indiana. I didn't feel comfortable playing him. I think it was Sunday, and I had mentioned that if you're going to play Sarge, you can't play Holmes because one of those guys is going to go off and the other one's not. If one of the guys is getting all the rebounds, the other one is not. So I think I would go back to Sarge. He's 7,700. I know it's a price increase, but he's against Brooklyn, and if it's going to be a close game, Sarge just see big minutes, him and Covington both. Because Philly has typically now, lately, 3 out of his last 4, he's played under 30 minutes. But that's because their games have kind of gotten out of hand for the most part, and or he's gotten into foul trouble. So if he stays out of foul trouble, which I think he will, and the game stays close, which I think it will, I think Sarge could have a huge game, and I definitely like him at 7,700. James Johnson, I'm off James Johnson. I was big. I was trying to sell Fuego on him on Sunday, and Fuego was with me. He liked him a lot too, and he ended up playing with. So I think me and Fuego were on the same page that day. But yeah, he did great for us against Boston. Phenomenal game, and he's 6,600 against Detroit. I know Porzingis just destroyed them, but I'm still not big on Johnson this game. There's just too many other big plays. Marvin Williams certainly interesting at 61. Ilyasova 6K. That seems expensive, but I think his price might make him a little contrarian. And I think it's interesting because we know he's going to get a lot of minutes. Now, he hasn't played well against Phoenix this season. In 3 games, he's averaging 21.4 minutes and 17.8 DraftKings points. Granted, he was probably on a different team for most of that. But at 6K, it could be an interesting contrarian option just because I think people have been kind of playing him every time, waiting for him to get all the minutes. And his minutes have been okay, but they haven't been that dominant considering all the injuries. So it might be interesting to hop on him. Marquise Chris, you could certainly go there. There's no Millsap, and Chris they rely on for defense. He typically gets big minutes. What you have to worry about this guy every game is foul trouble. Out of his last 4 games, he had 2 fouls against Charlotte, which isn't bad. Against Boston, Brooklyn, and Miami, he had 5, 4, and 5 fouls. So you really do have to worry about foul trouble with him. But at 5,700, he's certainly in play. I prefer to play him when Warren is out, though. Gorgie Dang is interesting. Hollis Jefferson has been playing really well. Kaminsky at 52 is interesting, but I want to talk about Hollis Jefferson. He's been playing well in limited minutes. 3 straight games above 30 DraftKings points, and he has not broken 25 minutes in one. That's something I find hard to trust. He's going up against Philly, and it seems like a decent spot. I can't do it, especially not at 5,200. This price is way too high for me to play this guy. The guy doesn't play more than 25 minutes. I can't pay 5.2 for him. I just can't. Even in a close game, not to mention he's going to have a tough matchup. If he plays the 3, he's going to see Robert Covington defense. If he plays the 4, he's going to see Sarge. So I don't like Rondé Hollis Jefferson. I think he's way too expensive. Thad Young's been disappointing lately, but you can certainly give him a shot. He's cheap enough. Some of these guys that are so cheap, you have to consider as punt options. Anyway, we're still waiting on value, so we'll move on. Let's see. Whiteside 8,200 against Drummond. I think it's a great spot. I'm a little concerned with the way Detroit's been playing that they might just get ran out of the gym here. And if they do get ran out of the gym, it's probably going to be because Whiteside just destroys them. I watched Hernan Gomez and Porzingis dunk all over Drummond. And if you think Whiteside can't do that, you're out of your mind. So I can definitely see Whiteside mashing. And for some reason, people continue to not really play him all that much. So I definitely like Whiteside even at 8,200. Dwight Howard's in a dream spot against Phoenix. There's really nobody here to stop him. There's no really good rim protector to stop Howard. So I definitely think that he's somebody you can certainly consider. His price is up there, but you know what you're getting with him. You know you're getting some decent usage with the guy, and it's comforting. And like I said, he's playing Phoenix. The only concern you have here is if this game gets out of hand, he's going to be one of the first guys they pull. But if you think this game's going to be close, and Atlanta has not played well, so this game could stay close. Not to mention, we saw against Brooklyn, Howard only played 28 minutes and still got 42 DraftKings points. So I think Dwight Howard is definitely in play. And he's a guy I don't typically play all that much. Drummond, I don't like playing big men on the back end of a back-to-back, but I don't think he played all that many minutes against the Knicks. He only played 20 minutes against Orlando, and then that just makes it tough. Against the Knicks last night, he was crushing, and then he just kind of stopped, and they had to pull him. So he's a little scary to play right now. Brolo is 6,900. The guy's price never seems to move. In 2 games against Philly, he's averaging 45.6 DraftKings points. You got to love Brolo. He might be the chalky guy because everybody caught on now. They know to play centers against Philly. So he could be chalk, and in cash games, I think it's certainly fair to go there. You could play a bunch of Phillies guys and then just play him. I get that. But in tournaments, we have to start thinking about his ceiling here, and there's centers on there with like 60-point upside. And while this is a great matchup, I think his ceiling is probably, 50 DraftKings points, if that. So in cash games, I think it makes sense because I think he's got a pretty high floor against Philly, but you're going to have to think about it in tournaments. Miles Turner, 6,700, certainly in play. I was big on him Sunday, put him in my cash games. He had a great game for me, but he's another guy. He shot 7 for 9 from the field. He's not going to always do that. 16 rebounds was huge against Philly, but he's playing. He's going to have Cat down there fighting for rebounds with him. So he's okay at 67, but I'm not crazy about the price increase. Rashawn Holmes, 6,300 against Brooklyn. Brooklyn is just as bad against centers as Philly is, I think. Well, maybe not that bad, but he bounced back against Indiana, 34 DraftKings points after a couple horrible games. He's another guy with 50-point upside. He's 6,300, so his price has increased because of his matchup. But he's been losing minutes to Sean Long. So Long might be a guy you can consider. I don't think I talked about him. He's been listed as a power forward. They moved him over to center. He's 4,200. Long is a guy to consider. 2 straight games above 30 DraftKings points, and his price was under 4. Now he's 42, so he's not so much of a secret. So I think if you're playing multiple lineups and tournaments and you like Rashawn Holmes, you should definitely hedge a little bit and play some along, because I think that if Holmes doesn't get the minutes, then Long's gonna. Allen Williams, I'm not too big on him at 5,400 against Howard, and they've been playing Len a little more too. He did bounce back in his last game, but I'm just not crazy about him. Clint Capella, you can go there. I don't think I'm going to go there, but he's certainly in play in a pace-up spot. Should be a lot of rebounds to go around. Cody Zeller, Henson's out, so he should see Thon Maker and what's his name? And Greg Monroe, neither of which are very good defenders right now. So I think Zeller is interesting. He's been playing pretty consistent, and I think he's interesting. Not big on Monroe against Zeller. We talked about Kaminsky a bit. Alex Len, still only 4,600. I know the matchup is terrible, but I think you could still consider him just because he's so cheap. And if this game gets out of hand, then they'll pull Howard, and you won't have to worry about it. But, that's going to do it for us today. I mean, obviously there's other guys we can talk about, but, even Zaza. Zaza's pretty cheap at 3,800, but his minutes have been way down. So it's going to be an interesting slate. I think the problem is there's too many plays we like, right? Like, there's too many guys in great spots. So, have some fun, mix some things up. Use some of those lineup generators and get crazy with it, get interesting with it, because it's going to be a lot of fun. You might not necessarily win. You don't necessarily have to win. I mean, you want to win, obviously, but I think making lineups for this slate is going to be a good time. And so anyway, guys, that's going to be it for Tuesday's pod. We will be back with you tomorrow, and obviously on Wednesdays we have WiseTake Live from 5:30 to 6, so we're looking forward to that. Anyway, guys, enjoy. Awesome slates. Have some fun. If you're not having fun playing DFS, you should not be playing at all, because it's hard to win. And if you're not having fun or winning, then you're just wasting your time and money. Anyway, guys, as always, good luck.